Hi, Julianne.
Hi, Todd.
So can you believe it's been 20 years since we did this movie, which was an early film for both of us.
You'd never know it by looking at us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was just gonna, well, I can say that with a straight face. But,
That's nice.
and yeah, I was just, I've been looking back over some of the materials and interviews and early stuff that was generated for the film.
Yeah.
And just thinking about that time when we first met, which must have been
93.
the end of 93.
So it was, I was in Pittsburgh. I was doing a movie called Roommates with D.B. Sweeney and Peter Falk in Pittsburgh. And I got this script and I started to read it and it was electrifying. It was so exciting and so I thought, well, this isn't possible. I don't know why I have this script. And I got on the phone to my manager and I said, who's doing this? Doesn't somebody have an offer for this part? Because I can't imagine they're looking for anybody. This is the kind of thing where you have somebody in mind. And she said, no. I mean, later on, I found something else out. But she said, no, they're auditioning people. And I said, well, I have to audition for this. I just have to. And I flew home to New York City, like on a weekend, and you guys were having auditions above that Chase Bank on West Broadway.
Exactly,
and
225
I wanted to look
Lafayette
as
Street.
neutral as possible. Like really, and I wore a pair of white jeans and a white T-shirt, and I had this idea about the way she should speak. That I wanted the character not to put any weight on her larynx at all. So it was not even. So she never even, her voice never like sat.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and I thought, well, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do it the way I think I should do it because it's very clear to me. And if he doesn't like it, he doesn't like it. Nothing I can do.
Hi, it's me.
Hi. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great. Is it nice?
Yeah,
Great.
yeah. We'll see.
Did you forget anything?
No, I just, thought I'd call. Tell you I was here and everything.
No, I'm glad you caught me. We were just about to go grab a bite.
Oh, no, you guys go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm glad. It's nice there. That's great, honey. Look, you relax, you get well quick, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. As soon as we hit deadline.
Okay.
Okay, babe?
Okay. Love you.
Love you too, hon.
Say hi to Rory for me.
I will.
Hi.
Night, babe.
And so I came in and I did it, and I did one scene, and you were like, okay. I said, okay. I said, you can do the next one? And I don't know, we did it. And you said, okay. And I said, okay. I said, can you do one more? And I was like, okay. I said, okay. And then you went, thank you. And that was it. And I was like.
You had no clue.
No, none.
You did not know that I was absolutely, utterly, that I had actually just experienced something that I don't know that I have had anything equal to in my modest career.
Aww.
Seriously, Julie. Because I knew that script was incredibly, sort of unimaginably challenging.
Wow.
For an actor, for that character. I mean, it was built around the character, but I also knew that in some profound way, the character was constructed somewhat as a void.
Yeah.
And so I wonder, what was it when you first read it that made you feel that way, or feel like
clear?
Because you knew
I knew
what to do.
exactly who she was, and I thought, and I haven't had this experience, that often in my career either, where I was like, I know this person, I know who this is, and I'm not even going. Even if he wants me to do something differently with this, I'm not going to be able to because this is what's on the page. It was very, very clear that she's someone who's just trying not to take up any space at all.
Yeah.
So not taking it up vocally, not taking it up physically.
Yeah.
That idea of not claiming an identity anywhere, about being so tenuous, it broke my heart. It was so beautiful, and I didn't find it difficult at all. As a matter of fact, the thing that was kind of scary for me is I thought, well, I know how to do this, and it won't be. It wasn't hard to figure out,
Yeah.
It was going to be, sustaining it was challenging,
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was very, very clear very clear.
I mean,
I
so-
mean, I had the same experience with you later. I think I think I have an affinity for your material, and I feel
Yeah.
like I can hear it.
But what's so funny is that in both the films that we've done, both the films you've starred in,
Yeah.
Safe and later Far From Heaven, they both came from somewhat conceptual or theoretical origins, right?
Yeah.
From my, various plays around notions of identification
Right.
with character and setting up sort of barriers or obstacles to the ways that we normally access closeness or emotional familiarity with character, and even the whole notion of the quote-unquote arc in a story, which Safe really does follow.
Yeah.
But it follows an arc that we know from anything as sort of banal and generic as maybe disease movies of the week to, other kinds of film stories about women who find something about or
Right.
learn something about themselves by the end.
Right.
But what Carol learns at the end and the sort of terms of that arc or the
Yeah.
values associated in disease movies, for instance, with disease versus cure, in Safe are kind of inverted.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's things about where she ends up that you're really not supposed to be rooting for, even though it follows the
That traditional
narrative
that
form.
trope, that cinematic
Yeah.
trope too. So but then that cinematic trope, I think, also applies to where we, when you have these ideas in cinema and in literature, they permeate the culture, and so that people start to believe that those tropes exist in real life.
Right.
So she's constantly looking for that, for that
Yes,
arc.
exactly.
And so, but so rather, because she's always looking out, never looking in, there's that emptiness. And you also constructed someone who had no authentic connection. Like she didn't have, I love the fact that she had like a stepchild. It wasn't even her child.
Right.
She didn't have a job. She was sort of inhabiting someone else's house.
Exactly.
All of her relationships were tenuous. The gym
She was sort
stuff.
of an impersonator.
She was basing a lot on physicality, on these objects, and all the things
Yeah.
that people think bring meaning.
Right.
And so she really touched me too, because she was so desperate to just have it answered. She didn't. She just wanted everything answered by somebody else.
Yeah.
So then she becomes a perfect vessel for that place, and for that
Exactly.
idea of self-loathing, and you bring it on yourself. And anyway, I thought it was very, very clear in the script. And although you're a very intellectual filmmaker, I think that there's an emotional component to your work that's so huge and so resonant, and that's what makes it so rich.
Well, it resides in that very unique and rare relationship with my extraordinary actors that I've been able to work with. But what's funny to me, because I didn't know your work well, you had only done a couple films
I
at the
hadn't done
time.
anything, yeah.
We'd gone out to sort of see an early screening of Shortcuts.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And because we'd heard like the talk on the street was sort of this new emerging interesting actor,
Really?
Julianne Moore. Yeah. Are you kidding? I mean, this was only my second
Yeah,
feature,
yeah.
and I'd come out of a very untraditional, sort of more artist
Yeah.
approach to filmmaking or
Right.
Experimental film or queer cinema.
Yeah,
as I
and
was-
I'd come out of TV.
And-
That was what was
and you'd come out
interesting.
of TV.
Yeah, yeah.
But that certainly was not the sort of, mantle that you were associated with at the time,
Yeah.
because you were starting to do some very serious work in film. But I still don't quite understand, especially coming out of television
Yeah.
and doing, what was it that you knew to resist kind of filling in the gaps? Like there are places, do you know what I mean?
I
Like
do.
most actors would have such a hard time letting what is kind of unknowable about Carol White stay so.
Right.
And generating a kind of anxiety in the viewer, but also a curiosity
Yeah.
and a level of suspense about, is this illness real?
Yeah.
Is she going to find the answers? Is she going to make a change from this life that we see is not fulfilling her as a person?
Right.
And then ultimately in the third act of the film, what is Renwood and what is it really answering? It
Yeah.
seems to be answering all those questions that we always want in a movie, like particularly in films about disease in women, more than what is the disease and how does it function, why
Right.
did it happen to this person to,
this
begin
person.
with?
Which is interesting. I don't really care about disease
Why?
movies or why. I
Right.
don't care about why or
Right.
what the, I think because I think I knew because of the clarity of the language, because I knew right away when I presented it that way and you offered no resistance and you didn't want me to do anything. So I was like, aha, I was right. I was right. It is going to be that still. It's going to be that delicate. It's going to be that real, in a sense, because there's something about the behavior in the film that's not theatrical. I mean, there's something comedic about it too, oddly, because it's so resolutely not theatrical. So I know that I do my part, and that the other part comes in. That it's direct. The other part is directorial, so it happens in the frame. It happens in how you tell the story.
Right.
So that's why I would say to you, can I see the frame?
Yeah.
And I go, oh, okay. So like in the frame in the baby shower thing, you have all these women standing over here and going exclaiming over the thing, and then Carol's at this edge of the frame, and she stands up and says, "Can I go to the bathroom?" So your eye goes from this, to her like this circular kind of thing, and this she's so isolated, and so I don't need to tell that story.
Right.
I don't need to tell the cinematic story. You're telling the story because you're the director. I just need to do the acting part, which is clear to me from the language.
Right.
Which also happened to me in Far From Heaven, where, remember we did that one reading, and I was like, let me just read it and make sure I'm on track, and you were like, yeah. I was like, great.
But I mean, even that, I mean, I would think even just knowing the frames, examining the frames of Safe, which have such an austerity.
Yeah.
And often posit her, even if it's in a kind of almost aggressive symmetry in the center of the frame, she's really dwarfed by these massive interiors that she is sort of almost among the objects of, and sort of depicted in that way. And, so much of the early scenes of the film have those, where she's starting to sort of peel away from normal life and find herself up in the middle of the night, standing outside by the pool, unable to sleep, walking the front of the yard, until a security truck calls her out on it and says, "Is everything all right, ma'am?"
Right.
But just finding herself beginning to feel like she's living on the margins of a life.
She's living in the margin of the life, and she's in the margin of the frame. So you marginalize her in her own life and in her own frame. So as an actor, I'm like, well, I know where this person is emotionally because I can see where the director's seeing her. So I can do that, and then if I know where I'm in the frame and what's happening, I can feel it, but I can also physicalize it in my body in the frame. You know, I mean, if I pitch forward just the tiniest bit or something, then you know where she is.
Do you feel that it often takes actors a lot more time and experience to trust how little to do, how little actually can actually trigger the most from a viewer?
But
that
the
interesting
problem is
relationship.
You're not always working in that way with a director, with a filmmaker, or with a group of people. There are so many. There's genre films. There are different there are just different tones to things. There are different things stylistically. So you can only do that when you and the director are in the same movie.
Right.
So, and not everybody is in the same movie. So there are times when you can do very, you can work that way. But there are times when you can't because there's maybe there's no point of view, which for me is that's when I lose it because I'm like, people get upset. Some people get upset when I ask where the frame is.
Right.
Or they'll say, or I'll say, do you have a shot list?
Right.
And they're like, well, I don't have a shot list yet because I haven't thought of it. What do you want to do? And I'm like, well, if you tell me the shot list, then I can tell you what I'm going to do because I don't know how you're framing it.
Yeah.
So I can't tell my story unless I know what your story is.
Right.
And if you just base it off of what I'm doing, then who's the director?
Yeah.
Then
Right.
I'm like,
it's a
then they get
circular process.
You're like chasing our tails.
Yeah.
So you can't do that all the time. I mean, you can't do it all the time. You have to know when you can and when you can't. For me, when I can, it's a real pleasure and a real relief. That's why I like film.
I mean, I remember us talking a little bit about, these kinds of women, this culture in, the San Fernando Valley, this sort of, middle class, upper middle class wealth of areas like Lake Encino,
Yeah.
where we shot a lot of the film.
Yeah.
And where my parents
And where you grew up.
lived.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I didn't grow up in Lake Encino, but I grew up in that relative area.
Yeah.
But when by the time we were in, junior high, that's where they had built a new
Yeah.
home. And I just started to watch this whole neighborhood evolve. And I remember literally beginning to think about this movie and driving up, like visit my parents when I was home from college and going to, or home from New York. But I started to think about it, I guess, in the early 90s when they first started to report on environmental illness and a few key
Yeah.
articles that came out in the New York Times Magazine, and one tabloid TV story that I'll never forget, describing it as 20th century illness. Right?
Yeah.
That women were the most predominant sufferers of. Which, of course, brought up all kinds of questions about whether, in fact, this was an authentic illness or
Which
not.
is what's interesting, because women were experiencing it. People were saying that it wasn't authentic.
Exactly.
It's like that old idea of hysteria.
Exactly. Totally. Going back
Yeah.
into the whole history of
Yeah.
questioning an illness because
it's primarily female.
A female subject.
I
It was
know.
only until men in the workplace started to suffer from the same thing that they actually started to take it seriously.
Yeah.
But I would drive up to this house, Alonzo, that was this new, huge monstrosity. And I would just sit there in my car and I would smoke a little pot and listen to Sonic Youth.
Sonic Youth, I remember you said
remember
that.
this?
Yes,
and start
yeah.
to think about this movie. Well, that ended up being the exact house that we got permission to
Right.
use for the exterior, at least,
Yeah.
of Carol's house. And then we used the interior that was mostly my uncle's house in Malibu.
Yes.
And
Oh
then
my
my
gosh.
grandparents' house in North Hollywood.
And I knew LA so little then. I didn't know LA at all. I remember after Safe, somebody called me, after Safe and Shortcuts, the New Yorker called me the quintessential California actress. And I was like, I've never been to California. I don't know anything about California. I didn't know where I was half the time.
Right.
I didn't understand that I was in Malibu when
Right.
we were doing the stuff in your uncle's house. I just knew it was far.
Right.
I didn't understand North Hollywood versus Hollywood. I didn't know where I was.
If you didn't know California
Right.
at all, how did you know who this woman was so well? Who was this woman when you first read her?
I started with the vocal thing first. I started with the idea of someone not
I mean,
ever...
not that she's defined exclusively by region.
But, she isn't.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly,
Yeah.
it becomes important, the California part becomes important in the playing of her because those
Sure.
are what her, they're signifiers.
Yeah.
But initially I thought, well, what was clear to me is that this is a person who doesn't have a voice.
Yeah.
So I was going to start there, and like I said, talk right on top of my vocal cords. So that means they don't ever vibrate. So like when I'm talking right now, there's a vibration. The lower you go, the more they vibrate.
Right.
But if you're never on them at all, it's almost like you can't breathe. So there's not even a connection between her brain and her body. So you sort of start there, and then the upspeak stuff was relatively new.
Yeah, it was.
At the time. People really weren't doing it. It was coming out of California.
Mm-hmm.
It was very unusual in the rest of the country, and very definitively the
West Coast,
Southern California area.
Yeah.
So I started with that vocal thing, and then used the upspeak, and
Right.
also the upspeak, indicates a lack of assurance about anything.
Yes,
Do
exactly.
you want to go out?
Yeah.
Do you want to stay in?
Right.
I don't know what I want.
Yeah.
Do all that,
Yeah.
so it was all about that. And then everything else is a signifier, so it's
Right.
pretty easy for an actor. That's one of the interesting things about being an actor is that every choice you make is a signifier for that person.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody makes a choice randomly. No one dresses randomly. No one does their hair randomly.
Right.
No one walks randomly. No one, everything you do is a signifier, So here was someone who was so desperate for that sense of identity that the signifier was the couch, getting the wrong
Right.
couch,
Right.
and getting sick brought her into her body in a way that she hadn't ever been.
Yes,
So
exactly.
so it was that way of settling into something, and the shock of that, and the shock
Yeah.
of being uncomfortable, of being sick.
And just what you were saying earlier, that we didn't find Carol White in a state of kind of a happy domestic situation that felt authentic or felt natural or
Yeah.
felt pleasurable to her
Right.
initially. And I thought it was really important to not establish the film with a sense of a good beginning.
That happy before the tragedy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That actually the illness alerted her to a problem that already existed.
Yeah.
And became, this sort of almost predominance of signification.
Right.
You know, like somebody even described AIDS, and it's very hard to actually not think about safe and my prior feature poison
Without
existing in any other context as that time. And it was particularly questions about illness, of course, and questions about stigma, and questions about how illness unravels our senses of identity or self.
And also gives us identity.
And then gives us identity, and that's another
because it's
problematic.
bigger than you.
Exactly,
You know?
which can be dangerous at
Right.
times.
Well, when you look at all those films, when I started looking at all the films, the people with environmental illness, the communities, the people in Texas and stuff, how isolated they were, and how isolated within their communities, or isolated within their equipment, or whatever, and the sense of meaning and identity that these illnesses gave to them, because it subsumes them. There's no there anymore. There's nothing left.
Right. It's who they are and what they are.
Yeah.
And it's a new kind of community, and in many ways, Renwood, which we look to or hope to be an answer, or a way of solving some of the problems that Carol experiences or starts to feel are unraveling in her sense of an already unsure relationship to her life in Los Angeles. Ultimately, you realize, this is actually putting the onus of illness right back on the individual.
On the individual.
Yeah. And giving them a strange sense of control over an uncontrollable situation.
Yes,
and
which is what cults do.
Which is what cults do. And it was
which is so wonderful, because you're like, oh my God, these people are all so desperate for an answer that, because there is, if there's nothing but chaos, it's hard to put one foot in front of the other. It really, really is,
And that was
everybody.
that beautiful quote that I encountered from a cancer sufferer whose name I could only find is B. Sigmund, who wrote, "We humans would rather accept culpability than chaos."
Yeah, man.
And that's what Renwood is all about. Because you see, and that's what Louise Hay
was her
all
whole deal.
about. And in the AIDS world, how she wrote these, for people who might have forgotten, she wrote these sort of new age affirmation books based on with affirmations that basically were all about trying to regain control over your illness by saying you were the blame.
Responsible.
You're responsible.
It's such dangerous stuff.
That you became sick because you didn't love yourself enough, and that if you learned how to love yourself enough by following these daily affirmations and these daily rituals,
you would heal yourself.
You would heal yourself.
Yeah.
But that ultimately put you in an impossible situation of imminent failure.
Right.
Right? While feeling I now own all the tools and levers to determine my future, but actually it's exactly the opposite.
That's right.
And it was this amazing thing within the sort of leftist culture that we once used to look at socioeconomic issues and political issues and cultural issues as the problem. And then with this sort of new era of a kind of reconnection to mystical thought, Eastern tradition, all these kind of spiritual cravings. Yeah. We basically let the culture go, gave it no responsibility anymore for what was happening, and it was just
this
the
responsibility
individual.
of the self.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's really what's so funny, and I think it's because the character of Peter Dunning in the movie is so subtly and persuasively portrayed by Peter Friedman, and as is his entire company of people out there in that section, that it confused audiences, and they really felt. And yes, I was playing coy.
But we're culturally confused as well. Because we haven't. Because all those ideas exist, and people still are out there saying, like, if you find meaning and structure, go ahead, Right. I mean, there are parts of our culture that are like, well, there is only chaos. There are people who believe in that.
Right.
And frankly, I'm one of them.
I am too.
But that doesn't mean that I don't like structure.
Sure.
And I don't like, anything that offers people a sense of belonging and community and identity and that makes you feel better as long as you're doing no harm to anyone else, I think is fine.
Right, exactly.
That doesn't mean that I think it's true. I think it's fine.
Right.
So I mean, there's a difference there.
It's like ways of looking at religious practice.
Yes,
absolutely. And people who say there's a reason for everything.
Yeah.
But what if there isn't a reason for everything?
But it's too hard. It's just too hard for people to feel that way all the time. I think.
Exactly.
So that's why the movie was so confusing, because you're like, well, wait a minute. Once again, you're taking this trope
Right.
that we've taken from our cultures,
Right.
and you're twisting it. So people are like, well, wait a minute, but that's true. And you're
Right.
saying, is it?
Right. And this is
Maybe it's
where
not.
these kinds of answers should introduce themselves in a
Yeah.
movie like this. Beginning of the third act.
Right.
And think little slightly nasty tricks on my part where we introduce Peter as a chemically sensitive person with AIDS.
I forgot he had
right,
AIDS.
and I'm the
I
nuclear
forgot.
cinema director introducing a supposedly gay man
With
as
AIDS,
the head
or
with
therefore
AIDS.
he should be.
He has to be a reliable character,
Right,
and somebody
right.
whose dogma and whose discourse you will
Yeah.
believe in and will trust in. It's going to get Carol to a better place,
Right.
right? And then there's people of color there for the first time in this
Right.
very white movie.
Yeah.
And you think, oh wow, this is really a melting pot.
That's right.
of
And there's a
class.
romantic,
There's a
James
romantic
LeGros playing a
potential.
romantic interest, and we think, oh, that's
Exactly.
going to go somewhere, and then you watch that dead end.
Right. It's a
And, you
nasty.
know,
I can now
yeah.
see. Okay.
Right.
Why
This is, wait a minute, it's
drove-
supposed to go this way, this way, this way, this way. Do you remember, or maybe I shouldn't say this on the film, but I remember getting a phone call from, I was making 9 months in San Francisco, and Safe was at Sundance.
Oh.
And I got a phone call saying, everybody walked out. And I was like, what? They're like, everybody walked out.
Yeah.
Everybody walked out.
Yeah.
And it seemed to confound people, even in independent film at the time. You know, they were just like, what?
Yes.
I mean,
It was a
yeah.
film. I mean, they didn't all walk out. I'll just
Right?
say.
No, I know. I don't mean it that way.
I
Sorry,
was
no,
there.
no, I didn't mean it
but-
that way.
No, but they were no,
he was
no.
scared.
But it
People
was
were really,
they
yeah.
were left utterly perplexed by it. Kids was the film everybody was talking about at that Sundance Festival that Christine also
Yes,
produced.
that's right.
But it was a film that absolutely and totally confused people,
Yeah.
the critics, and they didn't know what to make of it that first year. The amazing thing about the critical community in film at that time, and I'm not sure if that's something you can say about critics today in film, is that they all felt compelled to want to revisit the film during the year that it was out, right, when
Right.
it finally came out. So they went back. And they started to have all of these kind of internal debates, like about
What is
Safe,
it?
and people who were like, I got it, you didn't get it.
Right, right.
Things like that. Like there was a sort of hierarchy of getting the movie or not. And but I felt like, wow, that's amazing. Like a film can actually put you off at first and leave you uncertain, but then
Well,
you're
because you were,
enticed
you know,
to.
you were positing all these questions, all these ideas, and saying, you know, then think about it. You know, so you weren't saying this is the answer, or that's the answer, or
Right.
this is the answer. It was just like these are the situations, and this is what she goes toward, and this is what's happening with her. So where in her journey do you find the authenticity? I'm not going to do that for you to
Right.
say like this is inauthentic and that is authentic. I'm
Right.
going to mix it up
Right.
and let the audience decide.
Exactly.
But then the other thing that you did so brilliantly is that in every single scene, there's a reaction that could be based on a chemical reaction or an emotional reaction.
Right.
So that's the audience is left to decide that too.
Right.
You know, so someone, you know, she gets her hair done, but then she's also anxious. You know, so it's like
Right.
what caused the nosebleed?
Right.
You know, what is it just too dry? Whatever. You know, who knows?
Exactly.
You know.
Yes.
So there was always ambiguity. And
Yeah.
within every reaction, there was ambiguity.
Sure. I mean, there was something fascinatingly inexplicable about this condition.
Yeah.
That was a very inspiring kind of terrain to get into, because it still bore so many of the sort of aspects of stigma that AIDS did, but it was, in addition to that, something that people were literally questioning
Yeah.
the mere existence of.
Well, just the whole idea of carpets outgassing. I mean,
Yes.
it's hard to believe that at that time people wouldn't
Wouldn't have
acknowledge the
acknowledged
fact
it.
that. And I'm like, you can go into a fabric store or a carpet store and your
Absolutely.
eyes will start to run in tears. So
Absolutely.
I don't understand why they wouldn't think that if you put the carpet in your house, it could make you sick too.
Absolutely. I mean, there was validity to it. There was also a kind of larger, kind of emotional, psychic logic to it that maybe
Yeah.
exceeded the
Specificity
of the actual chemical issues. But the chemical issues are sound.
People don't know why something's happening to them. They just know it's happening.
Yeah.
So what's happening to Carol is true. She's
Yeah.
sick.
Yeah.
So she is sick. She doesn't know why she's sick. She doesn't know why she's so uncomfortable in this environment that she's completely defined herself by. She is desperate to not be sick.
Yeah.
So in doing that, you're like, well, how do I make myself well? How do I, is it is it this, the chemicals? Are the chemicals doing it, you know?
Yeah.
Or wait a minute, I met this person who told me that I can cure myself by believing in this other thing, you know? So whether or not any of it is true doesn't matter. It's whatever she feels is happening to her.
Right.
And that's all any of us feel.
Exactly.
I can't tell you why. You could go, you know,
Right.
you have certain behaviors and you go to a therapist. Your therapist tries to help you figure out why you have these reactions.
Yeah.
And in Freudian psychology, it all has to do with your parents. In pharmacology, it has to do with your chemical makeup.
Exactly.
What's true?
Right.
You know, so you have one person telling you, well, you know, this is, you know, X. You had to work in the fields when you were 7, and that's why you're anxious.
Right.
And your psychopharmacologist says, let me show you your blood levels, and you need this
Exactly.
Lexapro.
Yeah.
So once again, it doesn't matter. All she knows is
What she's
it's what she's
experiencing.
experiencing.
Yeah.
So you have to, you realize that she's, you know, Carol, interestingly enough, is searching.
And
you know?
I think that reaches a sort of, you know, apex in the last section of the film at Renwood,
Yeah.
where she's actually worsening physically.
Yes.
I mean, she describes being downwind from the road that she discovered on a run.
Yeah.
And a truck went by, and they're talking
Right.
about moving her to a different cabin because she's feeling the fumes, and this becomes an ongoing discussion between her and Claire and Peter.
Right.
And she starts to develop the
That
cyst
sore,
on her
yeah.
head after Nell's husband dies.
Yeah.
Like, there's all these, you know, factors that of course would produce emotional incentives
Yeah.
toward a body's, you know, vulnerability. But there's also real factors that we've established have actual
They have ramifications,
efficacy
physical, yeah.
for why they would affect her. But then she also is trying so hard to learn the words
Yeah.
of this new place that are part of the sort of, you know, contract maybe toward betterment or
Yeah.
toward recovery.
Yeah.
And she says that to Peter, I'm still learning,
the words.
you know? And then there's that scene at the end that you know, I don't know, it's just a scene I could always watch because of what you do in it. A lot of the actual transcript from it, it's the final speech you give after the birthday party
Yeah.
song at the center refectory. And the actual transcript came from women I interviewed at Wimberley.
Yeah, that's right. You told me.
Who
Yeah.
spoke in, you know, beautifully fragmented, the way real speech sounds,
yeah.
and I just loved it, and I couldn't let go of it. But when you perform it, it sounds like you're improvising.
Right.
But you're actually reading every word as transcribed.
It's word perfect. But one of the things
But
that
you
happened
make
to
it
me.
sound, and it's when you say, I really hated myself before I came
Right.
here, and you basically are performing the words.
Yeah.
The language.
And then when I was doing it, it's so interesting because I like to really have some things memorized when I work. It's
Yeah.
very important to me because I feel like it's only through real memorization that I become free with
Yeah.
with the
You don't have
language.
to think about
and
it.
your language was very, very specific and musical, you know, in a sense. I think, and so within that, she does fragment and she dies off and forgets what she's saying.
Yes.
And then the experience of doing it, I actually forgot. Which is what you want. You want to put yourself in a position
Wow.
where you can perform what the speech is. And so
Yeah.
when I got to the break, I was like, I don't know what comes next. You know, I thought like, I
didn't
don't
know
know.
that.
But because, you know, that's where you're trying to put yourself. So
Yeah.
you're like, I know the words as a part of me, but then there's part of the character that doesn't know what's happening.
Right.
So you want to have a physicalization of the acting happen on screen. And that did happen in that speech.
Because
I
you
remember that.
stumble, there's a part where you go kind of blank.
Blank. She goes blank. Yeah.
And you look a little glassy-eyed.
Yeah, and that's where I
right?
forgot. Yeah.
But then you resume.
Yeah.
But it's with a little bit of a stumble. That really is where the hairs stand up
Yeah,
the back
okay,
of your
that's
neck. You know, 'cause
good.
it's
But yeah, I remember because
so-
I was like, oh,
Yeah.
awesome, I forgot. Well, because you want, you want to
that.
communicate
You
that.
wanna-
And the thing about the end, when she looks in the mirror, I remember you said, are you okay? And it was surprisingly emotional to me. I didn't have the expectation that I would feel that much when I
Right,
did it.
right.
But I feel like that's where Carol is like going under. You know, and I think there's even an awareness that she's going under there. There's still the actual Carol, but she's just like you know, in this little igloo by herself, and that's like the saddest. She's at her saddest.
You
Yeah.
look like an alien
Yeah.
in that because you're all eyes.
Right.
And you've
Yeah.
shrunken down to this, you've lost your jawline.
Right, yeah.
And you provide this photograph of yourself in maybe high school, early in the film that we use in
That's
the
right,
scene where
with
Carol
my-
forgets who she is in the bedroom where Xander comes in.
That's right, with my big full face.
And you have a jaw, and you said, and it doesn't even look like you to me when
Yeah.
I look at it. And you said it reminded you of your mother, I think
Yeah,
you
yeah,
said.
yeah.
And by the end of the
Yeah.
film, you've completely changed shape.
Yeah.
It's a shape-shifting performance. It's really, the film is inconceivable without it. It is what makes it. You know, all the performers are great in the movie, clearly, but really, Julie, it's just fearless, and every time I learn something from it.
Oh, it was a pleasure to do. One of my all-time favorite experiences.
Wow.
It was really amazing, and it was my good fortune.
Was I ever lucky?
Oh, no, me.